All right, let's get into this. Because the story of India, well, it doesn't start where you think. It's not about kingdoms or empires. It's not even about the first cities or farms. To find the very first Indians, we have to rewind the clock way back. We're talking millions of years, on an absolutely epic journey through colliding continents, apocalyptic volcanoes, and what has to be the single greatest migration in all of human history.
So that brings us to the big question, right? The whole point of this explainer. Because the first people to walk on this land, they weren't the builders of the Indus Valley, they weren't the sages of the Vedas, and believe it or not, they weren't even our direct ancestors. So, who in the world were they? To get that answer, we first have to see the world they stepped into. So picture this. 50 million years ago, India wasn't even connected to Asia. It was this massive, lonely island, just drifting in the ocean. And for tens of millions of years, it just kept cruising north until, bam, it slammed into Asia. I mean, this collision was so violent, it literally pushed up the highest mountains on the entire planet, the Himalayas. And this massive wall, it changed everything. It created the monsoons, which carved out huge rivers and grew these incredibly lush forests. The stage was finally set. And what a stage it was. This was not the India we know today. It was a world of giants, seriously. The forests were stomping grounds for stegodons, these massive elephants with tusks 10 feet long. And the rivers, they were owned by hexaprotodons, hippo-like beasts the size of a truck, with jaws that could literally crush rocks. It was a world where size and raw power were the law. And into this world, the main actors, humanity, were just about to make their entrance. So fast forward to about 1.5 million years ago. A totally new kind of creature walks out of Africa and right into this land of giants. These were the first true pioneers, the very first humans to ever set foot in India, Homo erectus. Now, what's so fascinating is just how different these people were from us. Homo erectus, like the famous Narmada man fossil found right in central India, was built like a powerhouse athlete. A smaller brain than ours, a really strong jutting jaw, and their communication was probably a mix of gestures and grunts, nothing like the complex language we use today. You see, they weren't innovators like us. They were the ultimate survivors. And how exactly did they survive in a world of monsters? With this, the hand axe. This was their Swiss Army knife, their original smartphone. It's a single piece of stone, but it's expertly shaped to be a knife, a hammer, and a weapon. With this one simple-looking tool, they could hunt colossal elephants and stand up to terrifying predators. And they didn't just survive, they absolutely thrived. Think about this. For over 1 million years, they were the undisputed kings of the Indian subcontinent. 1 million years. They had conquered floods, droughts, every giant beast you can imagine. Their reign must have seemed unshakable, absolutely eternal. But they had no idea that thousands of miles away, a kind of natural time bomb was ticking, getting ready to literally wipe their entire world right off the map. Over in modern-day Indonesia on the island of Sumatra, a monster was waking up, the Toba supervolcano. It was about to unleash an eruption so unbelievably powerful, it would reset the course of life on Earth and spell doom for India's first masters. The explosion was so massive it might have actually been heard in India. But the sound, that wasn't the real killer. No, it was the ash. A colossal cloud drifted right over the subcontinent, and it completely blotted out the sun. Day turned into a permanent, suffocating twilight that lasted for years. Temperatures just plummeted, kicking off a volcanic winter that killed the plants, poisoned the rivers with acid rain, and choked the very air they needed to breathe. For Homo erectus, this was the beginning of the end. So why did these ultimate survivors suddenly vanish? I mean, how did that happen? Well, the answer is kind of ironic. Their greatest strengths became their fatal flaws. First, those big, muscular bodies. They were like gas-guzzling engines that needed tons of fuel. And that's an impossible demand when all the food just disappears. Second, their trusty old hand axe, totally useless for hunting the small, fast animals that were left. And third, and maybe most important, they lived for the now. They didn't really have the capacity for long-term abstract planning, for storing food, for preparing for a tomorrow that was going to be even worse than today. Their extinction completely cleared the stage for a new actor. Because while the world was reeling from Toba's impact, another human species, our species, Homo sapiens, was facing its own crisis back in a drought-stricken Africa. Just try to imagine being one of them. You're a father, you hunt all day,
and you come back empty-handed to your starving family. Or you're a mother, desperate for even a single drop of water. Their home just couldn't support them anymore, so they had a choice: stay and die or walk. And they chose to walk, a small band of families setting out for a completely unknown world.
But how did they pull off this incredible journey? Well, they were smart. Instead of just marching straight into the deadly Arabian desert, they hugged the coast. This is what we call the coastal migration theory. The sea, which could have been this huge barrier, actually became their lifeline, a constant, reliable source of food. We're talking fish, crabs, shellfish. So for thousands of years and for countless generations, they just kept walking east, following the shore. So when our ancestors finally arrived in India, they found a land that was basically reborn from the ashes of Toba. But it was still a dangerous place. And to survive, they would need something more than just muscle. They would need brain power. They would need innovation. This is the big shift, from just surviving to truly innovating. So, around 65,000 years ago, just to put that in perspective, this is a time when Neanderthals were still roaming around Europe. They made it. The descendants of those few families who left Africa finally walked onto the Indian subcontinent. And in places like the incredible rock shelters of Bhimbetka in central India, they found their first homes. Their success really came down to a technological revolution. They ditched the big, clumsy hand axe for these microliths. These are tiny, razor-sharp blades of stone. You could literally call it Stone Age missile technology. By attaching these little blades to shafts of wood or bone, they created deadly spears and arrows. And for the very first time, humans could hunt fast-moving animals from a safe distance. It was a complete game changer. But awesome new tech wasn't enough. They had a whole toolkit for survival. Caves like Bhimbetka became their first forts. Fire was like their security guard, keeping predators away. But it was also their first social network, a place to gather, share stories, and build a community. They basically created a sharing economy. The hunter who is successful today shares, because tomorrow he might be the one who's hungry. And we see the first spark of something much deeper. They began burying their dead with tools and ornaments. It's a sign they believed death wasn't the end, but maybe just another journey. This is the dawn of human spirituality. So this amazing combination of new technology, complex social structures, and abstract thought, it set the stage for the most incredible leap in all of human history. They were about to go from cave-dwelling hunters to the architects of some of the most advanced cities the ancient world had ever seen. And the pace of change from here on out is just breathtaking. Around 9,000 years ago, one revolutionary idea changed everything. Someone figured out you could plant a seed and grow your own food. Farming was born. That led to the first permanent villages, and then, just a couple of thousand years later, a massive explosion of cities in the Indus Valley. And we're not talking about just any cities. We're talking about the world's first planned smart cities rising right out of the plains. And the genius of these cities is just, it's staggering. I mean, imagine this. Their streets were laid out in a perfect grid, just like a modern city. The bricks they used to build everything were standardized to the exact same ratio across thousands of square miles. And get this. Homes had private bathrooms connected to this sophisticated network of covered drains with manholes for cleaning. We're talking 5,000 years ago. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro was an engineering marvel, perfectly waterproofed with natural tar. It's just incredible. So this incredible journey, right? From a lonely island to a land of giants, from the long survival of Homo erectus to the sheer ingenuity of our ancestors, it all culminates in these peaceful, incredibly organized cities. But, of course, history is never static. Recent discoveries, like advanced warrior chariots at a site called Sonoli, they hint that this peaceful era was followed by a much more turbulent one, maybe one that sounds a little more familiar from India's great epics. And it leaves us with this tantalizing question. Was the age of peace over, and was the age of heroes about to begin?